Back and bigger than ever, it's the unofficial 40 from Soonerscoop.com. Now, here's the entire Sooner Scoop crew. Carey, Josh, Eddie, and
George.
All right, welcome back. It is time for another edition of the Unofficial 40 podcast right here on Soonerscoop.com, presented by Schwab Meat Company, our good friends at Schwab Meat Company. They've been around a very long time, since 1930 or 1912. Proud to say I found the on-cue beef brisket Schwab dog, and one of the Mexican workers did not steal it from me this time.
Was it pretty good?
I don't know if I told you that story. They're awesome. They're unbelievable.
Sounds great.
I think one for lunch is it's a nice big thick hot dog. Anyway, go check them out, schwabmeat.com. We'll tell you a lot more about the presenting sponsor of the Unofficial 40 coming up in just a little bit. Well, welcome back. It's been an interesting week. Brent Venables had his press conference yesterday. I know you guys had your practice report out yesterday detailing a little bit of what was said, but I thought all in all it was good for Brent to kind of get out there and basically say, yeah, the offense sucks. I mean, it has problems. Instead of just talking about how his defense isn't doing their job. We get it. You're a perfectionist with the defense when it comes to, but that offense has been god-awful horrible, and it was just nice to hear him acknowledge that he knows that there are issues on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, he practically said that's the reason they've been losing, which obviously you watch the games, you know that, but for him to be that honest about it was appreciated. I know a lot of people are going to be mad at no matter what he says.
You lose to South Carolina, all this goes away, and you didn't.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. Yeah, I mean, it's clear that the fan base, I think, is starting to lose faith in Brent and this staff. That is my takeaway.
That's a strong. I don't know. Lose faith in Brent. I mean, it's hard.
There's a lot of people that are just a little bit leery. Maybe even the strongest believers that probably would still sign off and believe in Brent. I think that there's certainly more questions here as we hit the midway point of year number 3 than anybody was willing to maybe admit at the beginning of the season that we would be.
People know that it just looks very, very bad, and they want it to be fixed.
Yeah, I mean, offensively, it's the worst product Oklahoma's put on the field in 25 years of football.
Yeah.
I mean, it's straight up. It is what it is. The numbers tell you that.
I think people are wondering, can Brent fix it? Not just this year, but in the future. Like, can he? I think even like the biggest believers are like, okay, we still believe in Brent, but boy, he's got a lot to fix.
And he still really hasn't come out and said Seth Luttrell being an issue or anything like that.
I don't think that, like, my big takeaway is even if they are going to make a change at the offensive coordinator at the end of the season, I still think that he feels like there are plays to be made there. That was one of the big takeaways from Tuesday that we highlighted on the practice report, is that there's plays to be made. There are wide receivers that are open. You got to hit them.
And it's not that he's not supporting Seth, or he is supporting Seth. I mean, I didn't get that either way yesterday.
Yeah.
It was just that these guys have opportunities, whether it was missing guys that are wide open, not having the correct read, not having the right protections, holding. I mean, all the stuff that can go wrong has been going. He basically said what he said about his defense, and I kind of pointed this out, like, it reminds me of Danny Stutzman when he was a sophomore and Brent first got here, and we always asked him questions like, Danny, he would give us answers, and we would be like, does this guy get it? Like, does he care? Because it just didn't seem like...
Had those conversations coming out of the Russell Athletic Bowl, right?
Yeah.
In Orlando.
I mean, because it was
not
like...
Russell Athletic, the Cheez-It Bowl.
Well, yeah.
Cheez-It Bowl.
It'll always be the Russell Athletic Bowl in my heart. But it was one of those things that was like, Danny kind of sloughed off like Brent being in their face all the time. Like, oh, that's just Brent. He's always yelling at something. And you're like, I don't know if you know how serious this really is. Like, you're not very good, and the defense isn't playing well. And then he started hosting film studies at his house, and you really started to see him get it. Like, this is on us as players to do the things to make us successful. And now Danny has earned the right to be a captain. Everybody listens to him. He gets that. It's almost like I feel like Brent's doing the same thing with the offense right now.
Yeah, the problem with that though is that was like a maturity thing, right? Like maturing as a football player. I suppose you could argue that he's maturing as a head coach.
Are there any leaders though on this offense, or is there anyone that's considered a veteran that's playing right now?
I mean, Javonte Barnes.
Other
I guess.
than a lot of them, other than transfers,
a lot of them are hurt, I think. But here's the problem that I've come back to. I think Seth is definitely part of the problem. At the end of the day, even if guys are open, clearly the execution and the development standpoint's not working, and that falls on coaches too. I think Oklahoma has a talent problem on offense. There's not a single guy that I watch out there, and I get it, they're hurt at wide receiver. There's not a single guy out there that played against Texas that I'm like, that is a surefire NFL football player. That's an issue.
Yeah, and I think you're seeing like Georgia come back down to earth, Josh, a little bit. Like they don't exactly have the freaks all over on the offensive side of the ball anymore. I mean, what's the tight end last year that's nearly bald? That's with the Raiders.
Bowers,
like he was a stud, and he was everything. But like,
I mean, I think OU would kill for the skill talent that Georgia has.
Well, no, I mean, but I'm saying if you look at Alabama, you look at the guys that the Lions have from Alabama right now. Like those guys are even elite in the NFL. Just like to me, like Wingo for Texas, like he was an elite guy. And OU doesn't have anybody that looks nearly like that.
I mean, Ryan Williams would run. He's had no problem adjusting as a 17-year-old freshman.
Well, he's elite.
And I know
he doesn't have one.
I don't want to make it sound like I don't think a Zion.
I don't know what you think I'm saying. What I'm saying is Alabama has had these guys over and over and over again on offense that were elite. Georgia had them too for a while, and they've fallen off a little bit. I mean, but from really where they were, they're falling off a little bit.
I don't think so.
Why does it that Alabama and Georgia don't matter?
It does matter because we're talking about Oklahoma not having talent on offense. And they don't have guys. They used to have CeeDee Lamb and Hollywood Brown.
That's what I'm saying. They don't have any of those.
They don't have any of that anymore.
That's what I'm saying.
But other schools, you can see that they have that.
Yeah, but we're not talking about other schools. All I'm saying is that, like, I want to be clear that I'm not saying that like a Zion Kearney couldn't one day be an NFL player, but the talent is just not there, especially. And Josh, you could speak to this. The offensive line. I know Andy Staples wrote kind of a pretty big story this week, kind of talking about, they just whiffed in 21 and 22 in offensive line recruiting, and now they're paying the price for it. That's where it's like they don't have that talent there. They don't have the talent at tight end at all. Wide receiver, I know they've got guys out, but the talents, I mean, running back even, Tatum's their best guy, but he can't even run the plays right. Like it's across the board, every position. They don't have guys that are big playmakers.
Well, that's the scary part to me, guys, because I know everybody like, okay, change the quarterback. Okay, well, that didn't work. That didn't fix everything. Change the offensive coordinator. I think that's the scary thing that people don't want to just understand. It's not one thing. You're not going to fix this with one thing. There are a lot of problems, be it from a personnel standpoint, be it from a coaching standpoint, be it from a, what are the players gathering? Like, we know that Bill Bedenbaugh is a good offensive line coach. He showed us a lot of times. At the same time, we're watching this offensive line do things that we haven't seen OU's offensive line do in a decade. Like, so is there a connection problem there? Why is the message not getting across? Like, there's a lot of things that you wonder about. Like, why are these things not working? I will say, again, the receiver room, you almost just have to take what you're seeing with a grain of salt because those guys weren't expected to play. They thought they had their whole setup. I think there's talent in that room. Like, I know I know you feel the same, Jordan. I know I'm not trying to put words in your mouth. The running back room, I think there's talent. I mean, I know there is in Taylor Tatum, but are Javonte Barnes or Gavin Sawchuk any better as players than they were as freshmen? Like, no. I don't know that I see that big growth. At quarterback, Jackson Arnold, is he a better player than what he showed us last year as a true freshman? Nothing I saw in the first 4 games told me he was. In fact, I'd say quite the opposite. So, that's kind of my thing. Like, the development doesn't feel like it's there. I would give a little pushback on there not being talent. Like, I'm not saying the offensive line, there's no special guy there. I agree with that. Tight end, there's certainly nothing there that's jumped out at me. But, like, are there guys that if they're put in the right situations that I feel like could make plays? Yeah. Like, Zion Raggins is a 10-2 guy, And all OU's done to him all year is throw little hooks and curls. Like, what are we doing here? Like, let that guy run deep every once in a while and just see what happens. I don't understand. Like, you watch these offenses where, like, they're limited. They don't have this piece. They don't have that piece. But they find a way to best use the guys they do have, and I don't feel like Oklahoma does that at all.
I thought it was amazing. And George and I, we sat there and we were getting ready to do the post-game podcast on Saturday night, and it's just amazing. You turn on some of these teams, and I know they're very, very good offenses when you're talking about Ohio State or Oregon, Ole Miss, LSU. All these schools don't have a problem moving up and down the field, at least putting drives together, even if they're not scoring, and finding easy ways to get the football in some of their playmakers' hands. And it just seems like OU has not been able to do that. Seth Luttrell has not been able to unlock the key to just getting simple, easy plays to get guys in rhythm early in a game, and then even throughout the game. It's just been a disaster.
It just seems like things are complicated. Like,
Too complicated.
Like guys don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
Like what they're doing.
And that was like the biggest takeaway on Saturday night is, and I think everybody has said it since Saturday, just in the experience at the Cotton Bowl, it's just like you had 2 weeks to put together a game plan, and somehow you decided to go more complicated than you had all season, when you should have gone the opposite direction.
Yeah, it's just, it didn't make a lot of sense. And it looked awkward. And, I mean, the option stuff was just awkward looking. And then you don't do anything to, free people up or use your strengths, if, whatever those you think that those are. But, like, the tight ends kind of disappeared in that game. Bauer Sharp sort of disappeared. It was just, yeah, it was awful.
Well, and obviously the turnovers didn't help, because once the turnovers happened and you hit halftime and you're down by 18, the game was over.
I mean, it was so bad. Like, when it got to 14-3, you thought maybe it was over. Like, yeah. I don't know how OU gets 10 points out of this 100%. The rest of the way.
At 14-3, you thought it was over, and the way that they scored to go up 14-3 with the ball rolling through the end zone, and then they just happened to fall on it after you had them backed up in 3rd and 6 on their own 16-yard line with 4.5 minutes left. It's incredible.
And if you didn't think it was over at 14-3, you definitely thought it was over at 21-3.
There was no point of me when Bert Auburn misses back-to-back field goals that I go, they left the door open. There was no point of that. There was no point of that walking back up the tunnel at halftime. I was thinking about leaving rather than going back for the second half.
Well, look, here's the thing that I'm most concerned about. It keeps popping back into my head is they have to find out, and they have to make a decision about what they're going to do at the quarterback position moving forward this week. South Carolina becomes your, I don't know, what's where did the Civil War get fought? Where was the turn of that war?
Gettysburg.
We'll go with Gettysburg. But I mean, it's the turning point. Like, you either have to come out of this with Michael Hawkins knowing that he's your quarterback the rest of the way, or you got to go, or you say, we want to find some way to try and keep Jackson Arnold in this program. We're going to give him the job back and make it his.
Does it not seem like a tough ask to do that this week, though, against one of the better defenses that they're going to play here over the next 6 weeks? I mean, I know that everybody looks at South Carolina and they're 3-3 and 1-3, but
Eddie, I don't think it's about. Defense. I don't even think it's about scoring touchdowns. It's about the mistakes that we're hearing about with Michael Hawkins Jr. are not even about how good the defense is that you're playing. It's about, and I think Brent said this, like, the game is moving too fast for some people. And I think for Michael Hawkins Jr., the game is definitely moving too fast because it seems like he's making a lot of poor decisions. And it may not be the back-breaking ones that Jackson Arnold made where he fumbles the ball or he throws the backward pass.
This is a hell of a situation. You're saying you're at least getting to the point where you can f*** up with Jackson. I don't know if you're getting to the point where you can even make a turnover with Michael. Is that basically what
kind of, yeah.
I mean, the play, some plays are almost over before they begin.
Yeah, because you have no chance to even get into the play.
Because you're busting as soon as you catch the ball.
Yeah.
It's a good situation. Good development at the quarterback position in Norman, Oklahoma right now.
You know what they're going to need to decide this, Eddie? They're going to need incredible vision to be able to determine who is their quarterback for the foreseeable future, who they want to save. Will it be Jackson Arnold or will it be Michael Hawkins Jr.? you know what they could use? They could use some good vision, and they could probably use a trip to Enjoy.
I would request them to go to Enjoy Vision, which is the best laser vision center in Oklahoma City. Not even close to the combination of mind-blowing technology, experienced eyeball surgeons, and exceptional patient care was life-changing for me. What they're doing for the unofficial 40 listener, they're giving $400 off LASIK. All you got to go to is enjoywithme.com. That is the letter NJOY with me.com, and use promo code U40, $400 off LASIK. Enjoy Vision. This is where you LASIK.
Josh, I'm willing to say I may be on a hill all my own on this, but I'm curious about your thoughts about the quarterback, situation moving forward. And do you think a decision has to be made coming out of the South Carolina game? And I say that just because I think Jackson Arnold is done if Michael Hawkins continues to be the starter. If you want to keep him.
Yeah, to me, I mean, are you saying that you think they need to make a decision going into this game and then be done with it, or make a decision?
No, I think Michael Hawkins is going to start. I mean, Brent's been pretty clear on that. I'm saying if you get to halftime and you've got 3 points, or you haven't scored, or you haven't got close to the end zone, or you've had trouble, I think it's time to try and go back to Jackson. I mean, now you've got at least a healthy offensive line that he's in front of.
But once you make that switch, you cannot
it's
switch
done.
back again.
Yeah, it's done. It's Jackson Arnold the rest of the way.
That's your guy. Mm-hmm. Whoever.
And you risk losing Michael Hawkins Jr.
If they make another switch, that's it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I couldn't agree more. And guys, I think I would lean to Arnold. I think he gives you something in the passing game that you just don't have right now. And I know people will say, well, he's got the long pass to Hester. Like, guys, you look at what Oklahoma has accomplished offensively under Michael Hawkins. It was largely the stuff that impresses you was late in that Tennessee game against the Tennessee defense that was not prepared for him, and he brought some things that Jackson Arnold just doesn't. And I thought he made some nice throws. Like, I don't want to totally minimize it, but I think there are some mitigating factors that are relevant. Against Auburn, guys, they basically had 2 big plays. They had the deep ball to Hester, and Michael Hawkins broke a big run. And other than that, they did nothing offensively. I'll never get over 11 first downs in a college football game that you won. Like, I don't think – I would guess that probably hasn't happened more than 10 times in the last decade. Like, that's just not a game – that's not a recipe for success. And then we all saw against Texas that the offense was non-existent. I mean, that last drive made the numbers look much, much better than they were, and they're still putrid. So I think it's Arnold. I think you got to kind of live with whatever the growing pains are going to be, and it may be not even growing pains. That maybe this is who Jackson Arnold is. But I have seen more in the past that tells me Jackson Arnold can open up this passing game than I have for Michael Hawkins, and that's just the reality.
Let me throw this out there too, and George, feel free to answer because I know you brought this up, but do we all feel like the coaching staff has done a really poor job of handling the mental part of this with the quarterbacks, because everyone seems to be so afraid to make a mistake? I mean, it goes back to throwing out of the end of the end zone on 4th down at the end, or I don't know if it's 4th down, but it's the end of the game, last play of the game against Texas for Michael Hawkins. He ran out of bounds on 4th down before he picked up the first down. Like, it seems like the message to all those guys has been, whatever you do, just don't turn the ball over.
It's really tough because I still look back at the Tennessee game and we've said, oh, maybe they've handled this wrong. And at that time, they made the right choice
I agree,
by taking
100%.
Jackson out of the game. Now, since that moment, maybe there's been too much emphasis on, I think that Brent saw that game and said, well, if we just don't turn the ball over 3 times, we win. So that's the recipe for success moving forward. It's just don't turn the ball over and we're going to win football games. That's just not how it works. You still have to be aggressive offensively. And I think from that standpoint, there must, and I don't know this for fact, but behind the scenes, it definitely seems like there's maybe been some, hey, just if it's not there, just bite it. Just let the play go. And I just don't think you can play that way, and it's killed these guys' confidence. And with Jackson, that's what I'm really interested about, is if he were to go back into the game, what does he look like? Does he let it loose and play like he did in the Alamo Bowl? Because if he plays like he did in the Alamo Bowl, you can live with that. Like, you can live with that because you look back at that game, yeah, he had a couple really bad turnovers. He also had some awesome plays that you're like, oh, this kid's got it. And so And I would much rather see that than what we saw in the Cotton Bowl, which I think Michael Hawkins has a lot of talent, but it was clear that he was being very timid in the passing game and what they were asking him to do. So I think they've definitely mentally kind of screwed with these guys, and that's where you're hopeful that maybe in the way that Brent talked about it this week, they go to these guys, hey, just play loose, just go out there, let it fly, and you just kind of live with the results.
Don't worry about making mistakes.
Yeah, because right now it felt like they were just, the last couple of weeks have just been trying to avoid the big mistake because of how many mistakes they made against Tennessee.
Well, is that the whole program? Because like we talked about the second half, that defense, when they're late getting the calls and they're trying to be perfect with everything, and like it feels like everybody's just holding on too tight a little bit. Like, and I know that sounds counterproductive to a team that needs to get going and all that sort of stuff, but like these guys don't look like they're having any fun right now. Like, and I get it, you lost your rival, all that sort of stuff, but like there's no energy, which is what I always thought was one of the things that redeemed them in that first year, is that they did have a lot of energy. They had a lot of enthusiasm, and I don't see any of that right now.
Yeah, and I mean, let's face it, it's probably not a fun locker room to be in right now. I'm sure the offense doesn't like being around the defense because they know they're letting them down. I'm sure the defense is trying to hold back from criticizing them. I mean, it can't be good times in that locker room right now.
I do think it's a little bit better than maybe people listening to this would think, but I do think it's a combustible situation here over the next couple weeks.
Yep.
If you were to continue playing poorly on the offensive side of the ball, and if you are to lose some of these games here over the next couple weeks, and it's obvious why I think that would be the case. I don't expect them to just get the ball run down their throats by South Carolina this weekend. Hint, hint.
Well, and look, you guys mentioned the running backs too. I mean, I'll say this. I think we know that Gavin Sawchuk can be a good running back. He just needs a line. And I mean, I don't know if, I think, George, you kind of feel like Troy Everett's going to be in the starting lineup this week?
Maybe.
It's crazy.
I don't really have a good read on it.
It's crazy that we go into Dallas and it's like, all right, they found their 5. They're more healthy than they've ever been. And then all of a sudden, the Troy Everett thing at center, is Heath Ozida going to start at left guard?
They just pulled Tarquin after just one bad play. And it was like, okay, so is he just done now? Like, I don't know if he's going to start at left tackle.
I don't know if this is going to be the week that you really want to be testing out new tackles. It seems like there's going to be Kyle Kennard and Dylan Stewart are going to make some plays on Saturday. There's no doubt about that. Number 5 and number 6.
You're talking about two guys who will probably be first-round picks over the next couple of years. Like that, they are dudes, just flat-out dudes. And
Josh, do you think
somebody asked me in board chat, like, guys, which offensive tackle is best suited to block these guys? None.
Neither.
None of these guys are suited to block these guys. They are that good.
Can Dylan Stewart be a number 1 pick, possibly, when it's all said and done?
Like I said, I had a chance to see him at the All-American. Like, he is – you look at him and you're like, oh, man. Like, that he is what you draw up, and then you see what he puts on tape. And – again, guys, and I know I heard Gabe and Teddy talking about it, and they're exactly right. He's just going off feel right now. Like, he doesn't know where he's going half the time. He doesn't know what he's doing. But when you're 6'6", 250 and can fly, like, because again, to me, I thought that was something of a wake-up call in that Texas game at times for Michael Hawkins. When he would break outside of the pocket, Anthony Hill's just stride for stride running with him. Like, no, these guys got dudes that can run like you do. Dylan is that kind of guy. Like, Dylan, that's cool. You can bounce it outside on that zone read, but he is athletic enough to cut that angle, and a run that might get 7 or 8 might get 3. Like, it's just a very different thing when you're playing with athletes like this on the edge.
And to me, that was one of the more surprising things, just seeing it in person, is that Michael Hawkins couldn't run away from anybody in that game, and it shows you how far Texas has come athletically, speed-wise. Josh, is that something that even surprised you a little bit, just about maybe how much difference there is between athletes at Oklahoma and Texas since last year?
To a point, yeah. I would say Hawkins specifically surprised me a few times that he couldn't pull away from a few of those guys. but Texas, obviously, good athletes at the second level. I mean, Gabenda's a little undersized guy, but he can run around. So some of that, you could kind of see. But the fact that, there were a couple times, where he was trying to pull away from, one of their ends. And it's not that he didn't outrun the kid. He did. But it wasn't to the, kind of like what I'm talking about there with Dylan Stewart. It's not to the level you would expect it to be. And so a run that I was thinking was going to be 5, 6, 7 yards ends up as 2 or 3, and instead of 2nd and 3, Oklahoma's looking at 2nd and 7, and it's just a completely different scenario.
I would also say Texas was not threatened at all by the pass game, and it allowed them to play defensively in a way that they knew Hawkins was going to take off, and so they had guys spying Hawkins.
They were definitely spying, yeah.
Yeah, and it was just so they definitely had more speed than maybe you're used to from Texas, but it was also a situation where it was Texas was very clearly not threatened at all.
The deck was stacked in their favor.
Yes, yeah.
All right, we're going to get back to that. Want to remind you guys, presenting sponsor, Schwab Meat Company, the official hot dog of game days. These guys at Schwab, they've been doing NIL campaigns since the beginning of NIL with the sole purpose of helping support student athletes. They had Caleb Williams back in 2021, Brock Martin and Jalen Redmond in 2022. Shout out to Jalen Redmond, who's doing well with the Vikings right now. Drake Stoops and Kendall Daniels in 2023. This year, they've got Danny Stutzman and Nick Martin as part of their campaign, but they've been smoking the highest quality meats, hot dogs, sausages in Oklahoma City since 1912. And you can find Schwab products online at schwabmeat.com, at On Q stores, which I did yesterday, 7-Eleven, and Love's Travel Stops Roller Grills, and most Oklahoma grocery stores. And what they're doing for you, the Scoop listener or subscriber, free shipping on online orders over $75 with the code SoonerScoop. Just go online to schwabmeat.com, place your order for $75 or more, and you will get free shipping using that promo code SoonerScoop. And as you know, anybody that's bought any kind of meat or food product online, that shipping can get really expensive. So that's a great deal. Go check it out at schwabmeat.com. All right. I guess I'll throw it to the floor. Josh, you got to hear the press conference since you did the game day rewind. Anything else in particular with Brent that really kind of stood out with you that he had to talk about?
I thought he was. I continue to be impressed with how honest he is, and I know that's not the answer people want to hear. They want to hear me mad about something. I think he's very sincere in the things he's saying. I don't think he's trying to hide anything in particular. I think he's being pretty direct. You and I talked about in our group thread, and I thought there was some look backs that were a little strange, but in general, I thought he was. I didn't think he pulled a lot of punches. I thought he was pretty honest.
I thought something that was very interesting.
I was going to remind you to bring this up.
That I don't know if you guys caught this or not.
I did not at the time, but now looking back on it, I'm like,
There's been a lot of questions about how involved is Brent with the offense and helping with it. He mentioned yesterday that he is running Oklahoma's scout team defense. And that to me is super interesting because he is typically running the scout team offense to help prepare the defense, give them a look. That's where obviously the Jimmy Green Beans thing came from because he was so involved with the defense. He was doing that. But Josh, I thought that was really intriguing to me because it's if he's running the scout team defense and he talked about trying to give them the best look possible so that they can prepare more on game days, that tells me that he is very involved in what they're trying to do offensively, or at least trying to fix offensively. Because if you're running that side of the ball, the scout team, then you're obviously trying to give them, whatever looks they want to get and try and see what it looks like. Does that make sense, Josh?
Yeah, no, somebody asked me is he too much trying to control the offense? I'm like, I don't think anything could be less true. I feel like he's always been super hands off and just wanted to give the keys to the offensive coordinator. But I didn't hear it, George. That's interesting. I'm with Eddie. Until you pointed this out, I missed that. But I think it tells you the level of the people that are thinking Brent's taking this lightly or oh, it's just gonna all fix itself. That's not what's happening here. There is they are really trying to look under every rock, from what I can gather, to try and find some answer.
I mean, he said it yesterday. If you were looking for, like, I guess a smoking gun or something, I mean, he literally said, it's a direct quote, incredibly concerning and disappointing and frustrating. And he said it multiple ways, in different ways, to put out there without really truly throwing Seth Luttrell under the bus and backing him up.
And I hope they can fix it. Like, I still, I definitely, my faith has definitely shaken in Brent in the direction of this thing. When you look at the stats of like 1-8 versus top 25 teams, the performances against Texas the last 3 years, like there's definitely, I'm like, man, I don't know if this is moving in the right direction, but I don't think Brent is stupid. Like, he knows the problems that are going on with this team. I don't think Seth Luttrell is stupid either. Like, he's more than qualified to be a offensive coordinator in college football today, but you just wonder, can they actually fix it? And if they can't, this is going to be one of the most important off seasons, and I guess in 3 years since Lincoln Riley left. But it's these last 6 games, man. It's going to be it's huge for Brent's future.
It's a bear. It's a bear of a schedule. You get through South Carolina, and I think it even brings it even more true when you look up, and every opponent outside of South Carolina, and obviously Maine, but every conference opponent will be in the top 25. I mean, you have a somewhat must-winnable type game every week from here on out.
Yeah, and I saw a bunch of people were upset with Brent's comment yesterday when he said, the schedule's not easy, but I don't see any game on our schedule that we can't win. What do you expect him to say?
They would be jumping down his throat.
Well, we
the
probably
other
can't beat Alabama,
Yeah,
that'd be great.
It's like, obviously he's gonna.
That's shit for us to say, not him.
Yeah, and I'm sure in his head he goes, shit, like there's not a lot of winnable games on this in the back half, but of course he's gonna give the speech of like trying to win every game. I just like the other one was like, you can't not play well and win in the SEC. It's like, well, yeah, no shit, but like, what else do you expect him to say?
I remember walking across campus with buddies like 1996 before the season started. Just, you go down that schedule, there's not a game that we can't win. Like, you do that, everybody does that. Like, that's just the way that it goes. I mean, Brent's not at fault for saying something like that.
And it can't get any worse offensively.
You would think not. I guess they would have to start.
Don't say that. Don't say that. Yeah, don't say that.
They would have to start going backwards.
Stop it.
They would have to start going backwards, which it's been proven this year in the National Football League. You can pass for a negative yardage and still win a game.
Yeah.
Just look what the Broncos did at MetLife earlier this year.
Broncos. That's the thing, man. It's funny because I covered some just absolutely terrible.
You're desensitized to losing, I think.
I am.
I told you the other day, it's like, I don't know how much longer I can do this. And you're like, welcome to hell, buddy.
Yeah, I have covered some bad football teams in Denver. I covered some quarterbacks. Drew Lock was just horrendous 1 year. I mean, it Russell Wilson. I covered Russell Wilson, which was just a debacle. I had to ask 2 different head coaches if they thought they deserved to still have jobs. So it's like, I've seen it, man. This is up there.
I thought the Jets looked better without Nathaniel Hackett the other day.
Yeah. Well, Nathaniel
guys
Hackett,
like moving before the snap. It was amazing.
Nathaniel Hackett, all-time great dude to get a beer with. Terrible football coach.
I appreciate George stepping in front of this because since like over the last week, there's been a lot of, oh no, the Scoop crew poisoned George, and he used to be positive, and now he hates us just like they do, and especially Josh. He's done it. But George brought this to you all. George did this. This is not my fault. Like, I didn't do this. So I appreciate George accepting responsibility for all of this.
It is my fault. I started with jinxing the entire team by writing feature stories on Jackson Arnold and Seth Luttrell before the season.
We can talk about some positives. Defensively, wasn't good, wasn't great by any means against Texas, but I guess you do fall back on this idea. And you'll hear our interview with Wes Mitchell from Gamecock Central on the Game Day Preview on YouTube on Thursday, but you do fall back. If OU's going to win any of these games, it's going to have to lean on a defense that continues to, I guess, be able to get the job done, or at least be good enough to keep you in games to maybe give you the chance to win it in the fourth quarter.
They got a lot of bright future young players on that side. I mean, Eli Bowen, man.
Yeah, we haven't talked enough about Eli Bowen and what he's
awesome.
been able to do and just kind of stepping into a role. Like, he has a role on this defense here moving forward for me.
Are you surprised by that at all, Josh, that he's been able to this quickly contribute the way he is?
Yeah. I mean, like, I want to be honest. At the same time, I keep going back to, and I know I've brought it up a bunch of times, but like, OU was so adamant how much they liked Eli Bowen, dating all the way back to when they were recruiting Peyton. And they really, really wanted the message out there that they would take Eli even if they didn't get Peyton. And I think a lot of people at the time didn't feel that was the case. Because, guys, you remember when Peyton was committed to Notre Dame, Eli didn't have a Notre Dame offer. Like, they weren't that engaged there. So this is something Oklahoma saw. They absolutely believed in him. I thought the size would hold him back. But, guys, and you're there, so you could answer better than me. But when I see him on the field of the Cotton Bowl, I wasn't like, oh, he's so tiny. Like, he's short, but he's stocky. Like, it wasn't like, oh, he's a little bitty guy out there.
He's surprisingly, and very, very small sample size, maybe it's going to change, surprisingly very, very good tackler. And if nothing else, it's just because he's holding on to an ankle, but he's getting the guy down. It's nothing like special, I wouldn't say, but he's been very sure in getting guys down out on the outside. I've been pleasantly surprised by that and his physicality at such a smaller stature than some of the other guys in that room.
And they need that. I mean, especially at the corner position. I mean, you've got Gentry Williams that's out because he just hasn't been able to hold up physically. Good tackler when he's healthy, but it's taken a toll on him. And Kenai Walker's not always the greatest guy in tackle. I mean, there's the missed tackles in space in the second quarter. I mean, that was maybe the most difficult thing to watch on Saturday, just because you knew they had to be, like you said, almost perfect with that offense, and to watch that defense just kind of fall apart. I mean, it was just, and maybe that's why Brent was so in shock on Monday night. It was probably just rewatching that film, breaking it down that day with the team, and just probably couldn't believe his eyes. I mean, it was just shocking. And the room is shocked.
I just think we know what the defense is. Like, they're like,
yeah,
they're good. They're not great. They're going to give up some plays like any defense is, especially against an offense like Texas. I think you know what you're getting from them. I think they've been really good up front on the defensive line, like surprisingly much better than I thought they would be up front, which they're going to have to be really good this week in their South Carolina's run game. Linebacker's been really good. Corner's the one spot that they've kind of not been as good at. Safety too, but you know what you're getting from them. Like, you just do.
Well, and South Carolina's been turnover prone. And
yeah,
you've got to get back to creating turnovers, giving an advantage to your offense. I mean, you could use a nice pick six in this game, or a scoop and score.
Turnover prone for sure. Lead the country in turnovers. They also lead the country in sacks allowed. And you would imagine that somebody like I kind of almost circle somebody like an Ethan Downs this week, somebody that's played a ton of college football, to be able to maybe take advantage of the young tackle at South Carolina.
Yeah, and
this is going to be a Spider-Man meme game where, like, these two defenses are just going to be aggressive as hell and make either offense prove they can do something down the field. Like, there's no reason to do it any differently. I think Lenore Sellers has some promise. I see some things I like in him, but he hasn't shown you the ability to consistently hurt you deep. He started off pretty strong against LSU and did some good things there, but again, if I'm Oklahoma, I think you have to play it that way. Guys, what I will say, and George kind of touched on it, do you remember in the offseason, like, we were like, well, we know the back seven's really good, but we're not as sure about the front.
Yeah.
The defense is opposite of what I thought it was going to be. The front is very good. The front seven is very strong, and I think the safeties have been okay. The corners at times have been a problem, and I think it's grown and grown as they face better quarterbacks.
I did not see Robert Spears-Jones being the most consistent safety.
Jennings.
There it is. That's $1 in the tip jar.
Robert Spears-Jennings, sorry. I knew that.
Robert
there are
Spears
three
Jones,
names.
though, would be a sweet name.
The likelihood was tougher.
Robert Spears-Jones sounds like somebody that would be in a movie.
To
Sounds
Carey's
like an
credit, Brent only calls Robert Spears. He never says the Jennings part when he talks about it.
Every time I do a lower
Yeah.
third for him, I think that can't really be somebody's name. It's way too long.
It's a long name. It's surprising that it fits on the nameplate on the back.
But I mean, he's been fantastic. I mean, I think
he didn't play great last week. Spears Jennings.
Yeah, well, that's what happens when you send someone out on the field as the ball is being snapped.
Well, there wasn't just that play. There's a couple other plays he didn't play great, but he's been, for the most part, very, very good.
Yeah, he was the highest graded safety, right, going into the game last week.
See where Eli Bowen was the highest graded freshman by PFF?
He was great. I mean, he was literally one of the bright spots coming out of the Cotton Bowl. Him and Luke Elzinga, who over the last 2 weeks has been, really, truly through the first
What's the
half
punting
of the season.
award?
Ray Guy. He should be a finalist for the Ray Guy Award.
Yes.
He's been
very, very good. And, like, the numbers would tell you so, too. It's not just because we've seen him so much.
Did you see the stat that it's something like if you take away the Temple game, Luke Elzinga has more punting yards than Oklahoma's offense this year or something?
I believe it. I mean, sadly, I believe that, yes. He's been great.
By the way,
wow,
the South Carolina game,
6th nationally in yards per punt, 46.1.
The South Carolina game, if you want to go to an OU football game and you haven't been, this is the week for you, my friends. I'm on the Game Time app right now, gametime.co. Go download that app. You can get just create an account, use code ON3 for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Create that account, redeem code ON3 for $20 off. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed, and I've got the all-in pricing selected here, which is really cool. You can tell what fees you're going to have to pay. You can get tickets for $33 to this game. And there's not a lot of triple-digit tickets.
It's a whiteout, by the way.
And it is a whiteout, yes.
Which I did not know that until a couple days ago.
This is their second. I mean, they've already had to stripe the stadium, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, Game Time, you can, I mean, they've got great deals all over the place. They've got curated deals that make it easier to find the best price on great seats. The super deal, seat views before you buy. If you spin around in the app, you can see what your seat looks like and what's next to you. And also, like I said, lowest price guarantee, event cancellation protection, job loss protection, etc. So go to gametime.co, download that Game Time app, create your account, use that code ON3 for $20 off your first purchase. And again, terms do apply. So, I mean, the offense just in general, it's got so many problems. I think you just want to see some type of progress this week. I mean,
touchdowns. Let's start with touchdowns.
Yeah.
Well, let's start with first downs.
How about start with throw the ball down the field?
How about someone pass for over 200 yards? How about that? Just start there.
That would be
awesome.
a first. It would be a first this season.
My God.
They don't have 250-yard rusher for the season in 6 games. They don't have a 250-yard pass receiver in 6 games.
How much money have you made off
of
Prize Picks, by the way, just taking the under on OU quarterbacks this year, George?
$5,000.
Probably a few hundred, actually. But, yeah, not good.
Parlay all of it.
What do you guys think about the Deion Burks update we got?
I thought it was a little bit under the radar. It's going to be interesting to see if they can get any of these guys back. I know that we've talked, off camera. Obviously, we talked on camera in the practice report. Maybe a little naive to think that it's going to happen this week, but it does seem like you could get Deion Burks back at some point.
I've had so many people ask me what 80% of max means.
Here's my theory on it. I believe that they test these guys for speed on the field. And so, for example, if Deion Burks' top speed is 20 miles per hour, say, which is probably higher than that, but say it's 20 miles per hour, and he's at 80% max volume, that would mean he's at 16 miles per hour. So they're trying to weigh, do you play a Deion Burks at his 80% max speed versus 100%? And you also have to think, do you want to throw him out there and he just gets hurt again, kind of like Nick Anderson? He goes out there, gets hurt, and then you lose him for the season. I think that's what Brent means by max volume. I think he's talking about speed and wanting to get him probably, I would think, over 90% max volume. I just don't think they're gonna push the issue. I don't think he'll play this week. We'll see.
By the way, you're not saying that Nick Anderson's definitely lost for the season.
No. I don't know. I don't believe he is. I believe he's trying to get back. Same with Jalil Farouk. Sounds like Jalil Farouk is starting to kind of go through that rehab process with the
Ramp it up
with the boot coming off. So I would bet Missouri though for him. That's going to take some time. Interesting thing I was telling Eddie, he's only technically played in one game, so he could come back, play the Missouri game, Alabama game, and LSU game, plus if they make it to a bowl game.
Which doesn't count.
So he could play all those games and come back. I know that he's kind of in a situation where his intentions were to go to the NFL after this year, but if he were to get back his draft grade, and especially in a year that he's hurt and it's not very good, he would consider maybe coming back to OU and using that red shirt this year. So I would think the Missouri game would make the most sense if he can get back by then, but it also wouldn't shock me if he takes that bye week after the Missouri game and comes back for like Alabama.
One thing we've kind of glossed over a little bit, and we alluded to it earlier, but you talked about Andy Staples' article, and it's not something that we haven't talked about, but Josh, I mean, on the offensive line front, obviously I think if we've learned any cardinal rule, it's probably that you don't want to have over half of your offensive line be transfer portal guys. I mean, it's pretty clear if you're going to build a great offensive line in college, you need to do it with guys out of the high school ranks that develop in your program. I mean, is that one of the biggest lessons that we probably learned in the last couple of years?
Yeah, and guys, I've been looking at this more and more. Like, as you look around college football, and Carey, you were kind of alluding to it earlier. I don't know if intentionally at all, but when you were talking about Alabama and Georgia, when you look around college football, you can see a lot more volatility year to year from these teams that we all kind of think like, oh, this team's got it together, this team's got it together. Like Florida State, a year ago, everybody's like, well, okay, Mike Norvell's got the train on the tracks there, and they do a great job in the portal. And now, they're down there with Oklahoma in the offensive statistics. Their defense hasn't been what anybody thought it would. But I do. I mean, I think when you're talking about offensive line play and all the cohesion and all the communication and all the stuff that you've got to know what the guy next to you is doing, that's really tough to just cultivate in 6 months. Like one guy, okay, maybe, sure, yeah, you can find a way to make that work. Or if it's a supreme, if it's a Tyler Guyton, okay, you can find a way to make that work just because he's a special talent. But for most of the offensive linemen you're going to find in the portal, they're guys that are only going to be as good as the group. And if your group isn't special, they're not going to be anything, guys. I mean, like Spencer Brown, that's just an obvious huge miss for Oklahoma when they could have had a lot of guys that are starting and playing good roles around college football at, frankly, lesser programs. Like there's a guy at Illinois right now out of New Mexico, and he would absolutely be a starter for Oklahoma, and he's probably going to get drafted out of Illinois. So they've got to both do a better job in recruiting and developing those guys out of high school, but they've also, guys, I think the OU's got to take a look at what they're doing in the portal, because as you look around this roster, there's not a lot of portal guys where you say, well, that's a big hit. That was a huge win for them. I mean, there's a few,
Dominic
but
Williams
they're kind of rare. Yeah, like Dominic Williams, okay, but Bauer Sharp, miss. Spencer Brown, miss. Bebechi Nwiwu, miss. Like, I mean, you go down the list, and there's a lot of problems. Guys, even, like, I was going to say Deion Burks, but I still don't like that. I think Deion Burks is a good player. But there's a lot of them through the last few years, and even guys that were multi-year starters are that, like, you look at the great offensive lines that Oklahoma's had. Would McCade Mattire be part of that group? No, he wouldn't be. And so I think they need to make a focus more of getting 5, 6, 7 offensive linemen in every class, and then fill in 1 or 2 portal guys as needed.
And that's why this recruiting class is massive for Oklahoma, to keep it together.
Got to keep everybody together. I know that we've talked in depth about that. We talked about it on the recruiting report this week. You went and saw Ryan Fodje last week, Josh. My God, man. Very often am I just like completely blown away by offensive linemen and some of the video that you send back. And it might have been a little bit to do with the team that they were playing. I know he was quite superior to them, but man, that guy looks good.
Again, and you're right, Eddie. Like, you do have to qualify it a little bit. He was playing terrible competition, a team that, now I do think they have a few wins, but they're not good. And but when you watch him move, he just does stuff naturally that like some college offensive linemen don't do very well. And his pass sets and the way he bends and using his hands and that kind of stuff. Like I said in the recruiting report, I would like him to be more violent. I'd like him to finish blocks a little more physically in the run game, that kind of stuff. But if you told me that like midpoint next year he's a starter at Oklahoma, I don't think that's crazy. I just don't, which is wild considering where he was a year ago as like a 260-pound high school junior. But guys, you can see it on tape. He's 285, 290. Now, he's not going to be the 320 you might want him to be this time next year, but he still may be your best option at one of the tackle positions.
Yeah, I think the hardest thing about offensive line too, though, is even though Bill's going to have this, as long as they hold on to everybody, this great recruiting class, kind of like Andy said in his article. I mean, you can't count on those guys to be difference makers for you next year.
No.
Yeah.
No, but do you still?
It would be more about growing pains. I mean, like you're just getting through that for what could come in the future. I don't know.
And by the way,
it's tough for me to see that offensive line being stellar in any way in 2025.
By the way, when you talk about transfer portal evaluations, to me, that's such an indictment when you miss because you have college tape on these guys. Like, and maybe it doesn't for Bauer Sharp. Yeah, you don't have the right type of tape. I mean, but a Spencer Brown. Like, how do you not see that? That's what I want to know. Like with some of these evaluations.
Yeah. Like Branson Hickman's one of the tricky ones. Like that one's interesting because he played some decent comp, and I don't think he's ever been fully healthy at all this year. But with what we were talking about with George, kind of believe, the possibility being there that Troy Everett could start this week. I think Troy Everett should start this week. Hickman does not look right. He gets shoved around anytime he's against a bigger defensive lineman, and South Carolina is really good up front. Like, if anything else, I know Troy Everett's going to fight and claw and do everything he can to try to find a win. And not that Hickman's not trying. Troy Everett's just healthier than Branson Hickman is from everything I understand.
And I will say, I don't think Hickman was a bad evaluation as much as it was a desperate situation that they just had to take.
Because
a
when
center.
Everett went down,
yes.
They had to have somebody.
Josh, what I wanted to ask you, though, is do you still have some faith? Because you look at what they could return next year on the offensive line, and they could return, let's say Troy Everett starts the rest of the season. He'd be back at center. You bring back a Jacob Sexton who I don't know. I don't think he's really gotten much better, but maybe he takes a jump. You get back Jake Taylor, who I think's battling some injuries. Hito Zaida's starting to play a little bit more. Is there any hope that the guys that they've got on roster can get any better? They're still going to have to get a couple guys in the. They're going to have to get some guys in the transfer portal, but maybe not as many because you hope that some of the guys on the roster can develop.
Yeah, I mean, unlike this year where you have 5 guys that are new pieces and a lot of them are new to the program. You get guys next year that could be, returning with some experience. And, like you said, I mean, you could have Sexton. Let's say Sexton, there comes a point when I'm not that interested in watching Michael Tarquin anymore just because, like we said on the Game Day Rewind, it's about next year. Like, you've got to start putting guys out there and figuring out where they are. I'm not saying you bench Michael Tarquin. I'm not even saying Michael Tarquin has done anything to deserve that. But at the same time, Michael Tarquin's not going to be there next year, and you've got to figure out who is and who can help you. And I would like to see Sexton get some run at left tackle because can he do that? Like, I thought he was the surefire guy 2 years ago, and then everything that happened, and it just didn't work out. He had the injury, and he's never quite been the same to me. I don't know. Like, I don't know what the answer is there, but I'd like to get some sort of gauge on what he's going to be because I think it's been unfair to Jake in a lot of ways because he's just bounced back and forth constantly. That's really tough, and some of the mistakes I see him making, I think it is I've been playing guard for 2 months, and this thing that I do at guard is not what I would do at tackle. It's a different technique. So I just wonder a little bit about that. But, like at right guard, you got to open that competition. There's nothing Fodje has done to prove that Eddie Pierre-Louis shouldn't be getting some runs, shouldn't be getting some snaps to see what he can do to start planning for next year. But again, You talk about Everett at center, Sexton at left tackle, Taylor at right tackle, and Jake fighting through all he's fighting through. I think you feel kind of good about him next year. Like, you kind of think, okay, if this guy can get healthy and be right, okay, there's some stuff I believe in there. And if you can start with those three and you feel like they're playing at least above average football at the end of this year, okay, you've got something to build on. You add in, Fodje, Fasusi, all of a sudden your tackle room becomes much more talented, and they're young. You're going to have to work them in slowly. I'm not saying you give those guys starting jobs or anything like that, but then I think it's about guard. Can Eugene Brooks take over, as a left guard? Can EPL push Fabechi Nwiwu if he chooses to stay? There's a lot of things there that I think you start saying, okay, maybe 2025 is not going to be perfect, but it could be the building blocks of a really good offensive line going forward.
And it's just one of those things, like, I still believe in a guy like Logan Howland or Hito Zaida. Like, those two guys are still super young. And again, I'm not saying it's going to be a great offensive line next year, but it does look a little bit easier than this last year where, we were like, they're going to start, 4 transfers up front. Like, you're not in that exact same situation. But again, it depends, if this offensive staff is all let go after the season, then how many of, does a Jacob Sexton or a Jake Taylor enter the portal, a Troy Everett? Like, so you could be right back at square one either way. I don't know.
I think it's going to be interesting too, because 2025 is, going to be essentially the first year. The plan is, they get rid of the NLI, and, it ends up being a financial aid contract, and you have your NIL contract worked out together. Like, when you get in the portal, how is OU going to respond? Because they haven't always been the leaders in responding to how NIL is moving, and they have all these plans to do that. How is the negotiating going to go? Like, if they have the guy for the Eagles, or that used to be with the Eagles, in managing that stuff, they've got Curtis Lofton involved in it now. Like, how is that going to work? How smoothly is it going to be? Are other teams going to be poised to jump out in front of them and get guys that they want? Like, we're entering another era of unknown in the NIL, and I'm wondering how OU's going to end up handling it.
It's going to be interesting. And I brought up a point to you guys in the office the other day, but saying about, how much better would this offense be with Jeff Lebby in place? And it wasn't so much about him as a play caller as much as, would they have had better evaluations in the transfer portal? Would they have been able to keep a Caden Green? Because Lebby drove the bus on a lot of that NIL stuff.
Right.
And so you wonder, can Oklahoma, whether it's Seth Luttrell or whoever's the offensive coordinator, come in, make the right evaluations, and also, be aggressive in NIL. They were defensively, right, in the portal. They got it together and were able to get somebody like a Dominic Williams in the portal, but that is going to be huge, and that's why it's, portal opens December 9th, I believe. They've got and I know that they've got people already working on evaluations and what they are going to need in the portal, but it's going to be really important to know who's kind of running this thing. Like, if they were to go out and hire an offensive coordinator after the season, it would have to happen probably pretty quickly before that portal opens on December 9th.
Any predictions about what happened Saturday at the quarterback position?
I think
God!
I think
anybody want to go out there?
I have no idea. I think
Jackson's going to play.
I have no idea what they're going to do offensively. If they are going to dumb things down to a lack of better words, are they going to use or game plan themselves into a situation where they can take advantage of what they do well? And the fact that we're having to answer that question or ask that question going into game number 7 is frightening. It's downright shocking to a certain extent.
I think Jackson is at some point going to get in the game. But I also thought that against Texas. I said that a week ago, that I thought he was maybe a trick play or something. He'd be in there, and we never saw him. So
I just think Brent has hinted that this would, not that he said it, but I feel like he's saying this will conclude Michael Hawkins' body of work.
Yeah.
This game. And even at halftime, like, they wanted to give him the opportunity to have so much playing time. And if it's the same as we saw against Texas, I think you'll see Jackson Arnold.
The problem is I don't know where Jackson's at Like, what does Jackson want to be a part of this thing moving forward? Like, I think he's being a good soldier, and he'll go in there and everything. But is like, if you put him back in there, are you guaranteed that he's coming back next year? I don't know.
Yeah, and
that's the risk.
Yeah, definitely. But that's also kind of the situation that they put themselves in. I guess you would say that Jackson's played a part in that with his inability to not turn the ball over when given the opportunity. So I don't know.
I'm afraid that we're getting too much into the.
I definitely think though that you're right, Carey. Like
the
one of the
softness of this whole thing. When would Jackson Arnold really care to go back into the game? Like he's making a lot of money in NIL. That's not going away.
If the question was, does he want to go back in? I would say wholeheartedly yes.
I would say hell yes, he should want to go back in.
And I think that he does.
He does.
I think that he does. I mean,
I don't think the red shirt
closed.
thing. I don't think the red shirt thing is that big of a.
No, and it's like we've talked about before in the office. I think that like when you're talking about the redshirt year, if he were to transfer, say Michael Hawkins is going to be the guy and Jackson's going to enter into the transfer portal, the plan from the beginning would be to play 1 or 2 years and then go to the NFL.
Correct. Yeah.
So you're not going to need that third year anyways.
No.
Is this Jackson Dart's third year at Ole Miss?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Or no, second.
Yep.
Is it second? Second year.
Second year.
I think it's third.
Because he had the first year was with Spencer Sanders on the bench. Was that
that was
years
last
ago?
year.
Was
that
that
was last year? Spencer Sanders was down there last year. I thought it was the second, but either way. No, yeah, it would have been the third because it was either him or DG.
Mm-hmm.
No, that's right.
Yep.
Yeah, this would be his third year.
So I'm just saying he's a guy that's done well, but he stayed more than 2 years. I mean,
yeah, and I think there was a lot of people that maybe thought that Jackson Dart was going to take off last year, right? And then he came back, surprised everybody a little bit. I think NIL probably played a part in that, and his role in where he was going to go in the draft played a part in that.
It's going to be really interesting, though, on Saturday because I think Hawkins is going to have to play pretty good to keep the job.
It does seem like there's going to be a short leash. Yeah. I don't know how short that leash is, and I don't even really know, like, the whole resume thing has kind of not necessarily taken me off guard from what Brent has said, and I understand what he's trying to say. It's like, do we have an entire resume for Jackson as well? He's still relatively young.
He's only played in 5 games.
Right.
Yeah, I would say
4.5.
Hawkins, they both had benefits. I mean, Jackson got to play a little bit with Jalil Farouk.
One series.
One series. But he completed a pass to him. But the offensive line's been banged up the entire time he was out there. Now it's relatively healthy, and Michael Hawkins has had the benefit of that. He's also had these young receivers, be able to practice with them and have them get a little bit better. So I mean, they both had some advantages and disadvantages in their time.
For sure. And at the end of the day, I don't even know if I really care who the quarterback is, as long as they're moving the football and finding some success offensively. I'm not saying that anybody does. I mean, I don't think anybody's picked a side.
I think we're all rooting for both guys to have some success in their careers. It's just like at some point, OU just needs to pick one and move the ball.
Here's the thing. I am of the opinion that if and when OU does change offensive coordinators, I would rather have Jackson Arnold as my quarterback than Michael Hawkins Jr.
Because you think he has a better arm?
He's a better arm.
Just a better thrower.
Better arm
just
talent,
a better natural thrower of the football.
I would agree.
And he's not unathletic.
If I wanted to take the opposite side of that and take Michael Hawkins, I think that you would say that there's some stuff that Hawkins can do that Jackson can't do.
Sure. Yeah. I think it's a pick your. I don't know if pick your poison is the right one, but it also largely depends on who you're hiring as your offensive coordinator.
Exactly.
100%.
What system they're running.
OU's just never been in this spot. Go ahead, Josh.
I was going to say that's a really interesting thing. Like if let's say Hawkins doesn't do anything that stands out in the South Carolina game, say he even gets the whole game, is there some element? And again, we'd never know. It could never be discussed publicly. Is there some element of Brent Venables who's like, I kind of like this OC here. I like what he does, and that fits Mike or that fits Jackson better. I want to run that guy out there and see if maybe we can get something going, and we'll keep this guy for next year. And I'm going to try to go get this offensive coordinator doing this scheme and running these ideas. Like I don't think he'd look at it like that, but I think it's interesting to consider because almost certainly you're losing one of these guys at the end of the year. There's almost no question about it.
Also, the people out there that want Casey Thompson, you're a moron. You're a moron.
They're not morons. I
Why
think
you
And
gotta
that's no
call
slander
people
on
morons?
Casey. Let's be careful.
they just want it. They just want somebody else in there.
Yeah, I know, but it doesn't. Why? It makes no sense to play Casey Thompson.
We know that, but they don't know that. They look at Casey Thompson, the 5th-year guy or 6th-year guy,
Seventh
or
year.
7th-year guy, whatever.
He's played a lot of football.
And he's played a lot of football, and I think that on the surface, if you're just a natural fan, you just want the next guy, the next best option.
And by the way, I'll say this: SEC.
But I agree with you. I don't think that he's part of any plans.
SEC wise, wouldn't you say that it's more common for championship SEC type teams to have a quarterback like Jackson Arnold versus a Michael Hawkins Jr.?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, do you
I
consider
guess.
Jalen Milroe closer to Michael Hawkins, what he can do, but he
Yeah,
also
I
has a
would.
good arm?
Yeah.
I don't know.
But they haven't beat Georgia with a Stetson Bennett, or not a Stetson Bennett, but a who's their guy now?
Carson Beck?
Carson Beck.
Well, Carson Beck's really good.
But he's closer to a Jackson, I would say, than Hawkins.
I don't know if either of them are close to Carson Beck.
I'm just saying style.
Yeah, I don't know. Hell, I'd take a Quinn Ewers right now. That's not even a hit. That's not even a hit on Quinn Ewers.
Jesus. Yeah.
It has to be better. I know that. I don't know how many more weeks I can watch an offense struggling to put first downs together.
Well, you got 6 of
That's
them.
what we're all rooting for.
Damn it,
It's just
really?
our eyes to stop bleeding watching this.
Yeah.
Ugh.
If nothing else,
At least we'll be over, before midnight.
well, and
this
the
week.
weather's going to be nice. That's
Yeah.
that's a positive.
Give us 11 kicks the rest of the year.
Well, I
11
don't know
aim
about
kicks.
that, but-
I'm all for it.
I don't know about that.
Get it over with.
All right, Josh, anything you want to hit on in recruiting before we get out of here?
Yeah, probably the two big things, and it's rare anymore that I've got 2025 talk. But Austin Pay, big offensive lineman from Utah, he is coming in for an official visit this weekend. Talked about it in Woke. You can read some more about this. He's kind of an interesting situation because he will not be he is part of the 2025 class, but he will not be on any team's 2025 roster. He has a Mormon mission, so he's got to do that, and so Oklahoma absolutely will take him, from what I understand, but he doesn't factor in quite the same way that some of these other guys do. So it's kind of a nice win for Oklahoma to get a guy that's, got Oregon, got Texas A&M, got some good offers. If they could land him, I think that could be really, obviously a big one for Oklahoma. Secondarily is Caleb Burns, who we talked about on the Game Day Rewind. He has confirmed he'll be in Norman this weekend. He's going to take that unofficial visit following – and I joked with him a little bit, if two teams could be on more opposite ends of their week than Oregon and Oklahoma. And he was like, yeah, but he still was like, I want to go see, I want to check out Oklahoma. I think that's a win for Oklahoma because there was a feeling kind of like Monday, you were like, oh, this may not, he may never get to Norman. He may pull the trigger for Oregon. So for OU to get that trip out of him, I think that's a big win. And we'll work on the official visit list. I've got about 10 guys confirmed right now. There'll be more. I wouldn't, with an 11 o'clock kick, I mean, George is advocating for it. It's not great for recruiting. George kind of hates OU recruiting. So that all makes sense. But yeah, there is, I wouldn't expect a huge visit list this weekend.
Josh, 2 questions on one for each visitor. With Caleb Burns, is there any hope that Oklahoma, just in proximity to the Houston area, does that help, hurt? Does it matter in terms of distance from home for Caleb Burns? And then answer that, and then I'll throw the offensive line question at you.
Yeah, I think it does help. I really do. I think Caleb is a guy, from what I've gathered, pretty close with his mother. I think if all things are equal, I think he'd rather be a little closer to home if he could be. Obviously committed to Baylor right now. Is it enough to, make up the difference of, Oregon beating Ohio State and currently the number 2 team in the country? I don't know. But I definitely, again, this is a guy that Oklahoma really wants. And I thought it was interesting to kind of touch on one other guy in the Luke Metz story that our guy Chad Simmons had. Luke Metz mentioned Caleb Burns by name in the story there. Like, Luke Metz is from Georgia. Like, there's no connection between he and Caleb Burns, but clearly Zach Alley is being very direct. Like, hey, we're looking at this kid. We want you to come. And it kind of sounded like Luke Metz was at least entertaining the idea of a visit. I don't think they're going to steal a linebacker away from Alabama. It would be the first time in a long time they would have done something like that. But we'll watch. Hey, maybe something crazy could happen. But to answer your initial question, I do think Oklahoma is aided a little bit by their location.
With Austin Peay, has OU ever signed a guy that went on a Mormon mission? And B, that still counts in the 2025 class, but obviously he wouldn't be here until 2026. Would that affect their numbers in 2026 on the offensive line?
Well, I can't think of one. They've signed a couple guys out of Utah, but honestly, but I can't remember.
I don't know if I've ever heard of a guy signing and still taking the Mormon mission outside of Utah or BYU. I know it happens.
Mm-hmm.
But that seems very unusual.
You get a lot of that with like Oregon. Like they are kind of the school outside of Utah that does do a lot. They seem to do pretty well recruiting, Utah, a lot of the Mormon element. Wow, I make that sound kind of seedy. Sorry to our Mormon listeners. But no,
we have a ton.
Yeah, I know. With our content, I'm sure they're huge fans.
You guys went to Utah and you brought back a lot of listeners.
Actually, and they
listeners,
Austin,
I
don't expect Austin to be the only Utah visitor. The Crew Jones kid that was so good at camp this summer, he's supposed to be in this weekend. So a guy that's buddies with Zane Rowe. So that's kind of interesting to follow. But as far as Austin and how it would affect the 2026 class, I don't know, but like we've talked about, guys, I don't see the 2026 class like I saw 2025, where there was a bunch of guys in Oklahoma's region that were just no doubt, like, you got to get some of those guys, you got to win some of those battles. I don't think it's going to be as direct. So honestly, to push that down the line a little bit, I don't think is the worst thing for Oklahoma.
All right, that's going to do it for us this week. Don't forget, visit Eddie Radosevich's GoFundMe page so he can be the next person to run out with USC football.
I'm telling you, we got a small little drive in the Guy text group right now trying to raise the funds. I would love to do it November 16th. I don't know if USC
are you
has a game
serious?
that day. Yeah.
That's awesome.
and I would
Did you see that story?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
I would legitimately try to get the Buki sledgehammer.
We got to put.
God!
He's a GA at USC, right?
He was.
Buki?
He was.
So.
I don't know if he's still there. Or
Dude,
not.
you got to do that. We got
That'd
to
be
get
so
you to
amazing.
Do that. We need to put up.
What if I got to file
on the board?
What if they filed a restraining? Oh, they played Nebraska in Los Angeles that day on the bye week. That'd be amazing.
You and Will Compton.
Me and Will Compton running out arm in arm alongside Lincoln Riley. That would be unbelievable. What if they let me do that and then they ask me to leave the stadium?
I think it's going to be like the 12th man. They're going to close that loophole after last weekend.
I would imagine so, yes. But it was still funny that a Penn State guy did that.
Yeah.
Who do you
$1,800?
Who you guys got in Texas, Georgia this weekend?
I think Texas wins the game and Georgia covers. It's up to 5 right now.
Wow.
Which is not, I guess, necessarily surprising. Texas, number 1 team of the country, but
that's the one thing that I'm not gonna. No excuses. This is Oklahoma. I get it. I do think that they got their ass kicked by maybe the best team in the country.
They're pretty good.
They might win the national championship.
They're pretty good. We'll see. We'll see how they stack up against a really, really good football team in Georgia.
I just think they're very Texas is just watching them. They're very complete across the board.
Yeah.
There's
no doubt.
Not a lot of weaknesses.
It's another really good week in the college football slate. As bad as the OU Texas game was, October 12th lived up to the billing.
Yeah.
So funny, Josh.
I'm watching. I hadn't seen this. I'd missed this whole thing, so I am looking at the Penn State guy running out of the tunnel, and
he's wearing a muscle tee.
Right.
Which is maybe the most perfect thing for a Penn State grad that's living in California right now or Santa Monica, wherever he's from. It was awesome.
They should do that.
Congratulations to Penn State, a hearty win last week in Los Angeles.
They should do at USC. They should also have fans can pay enough to ask one question at the post-game press conference. I'm sure Lincoln would love that.
I'd show up for that.
They should do that enormous.
Ask professional questions, George.
Carey should show up for that. Eddie run out with the team, and then Carey asked the post-game question.
I think it would be.
Are you going to be the next head coach?
It'd be the perfect ending of the
Dallas
circle.
Cowboys.
The Dallas Cowboys.
Yes.
Yeah,
it'd be amazing.
That'd be great.
No, we'd have to wait until he's just about to be fired, and then Carey's like, "Are you going to be the next year's head coach at USC?"
Well, there's only
and just see how he deals with that.
If there's only 2 weeks left in the season, if we were to go out there on November 16th, so maybe we are getting to the end of it. I saw they lost 2 more defenders yesterday.
You should ask him if he would be interested in the Oklahoma offensive coordinator position.
That would be unbelievable. I've always wanted to be out there.
Or are you too afraid that people are going to try and break into your house again?
Yeah, is it the crime rate in Norman that would keep you from returning to Norman to coach the offensive side of the football?
The black Cadillac Escalades driving around.
Glad you said Cadillac. I was about to say E.
I was going to say that got concerning for a minute there.
Is that like
that's an
let a naysayer know?
Yeah, Reese Davis could come cover the link situation.
All right. That's going to do it. That's about all you can handle, I think, of the Scoop crew today. Thanks for listening. We'll see you back here next week for another edition of the Unofficial 40 Podcast right here on Soonerscoop.com.